What is going on, y'all? We are taking a look at another fairly simple and fun beginner-friendly algorithm here called, I guess, capitalizing words or something like that, or just capitalize. We need to write an algorithm that takes a string argument and capitalizes the first letter of each new word in a sentence. So, for example, if we have an input of the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, all lowercase letters, it should output the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, all capital letters. We're keeping this one beginner skill level, but it can be ratcheted up to intermediate or higher even, depending on what kind of niche scenarios you might put in, where it comes to things like punctuation, and symbols and things like that, and following proper grammar rules for things like nouns and whatnot. But we're going to keep it simple because, again, I want a lot of my first videos in this Conquering the JavaScript interview series to be fairly beginner friendly, to not discourage folks, as I've been there with my students where they'll try to go to hacker rank, and even the first couple questions out the gate meant for beginners is like still like, ugh. It needs to be dumbed down a little bit more sometimes to get y'all, to get your morale high as you approach this mindset of how to tackle these problems versus building a full stack CRUD app from scratch. This is a playlist series I have on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe if y'all want to check it out. So with capitalize, we need to do a couple of things. We're going to have to be able to loop through words in a string, or even just characters in a string, and determine whether they are the start of a new word or not. That's going to be our big condition we have to consider here. And there's a couple different ways to approach it, and I find this one clicks with my students and resonates with them the most. So let's go ahead and try throwing it in there. As always, we're going to need to have some kind of result that we're changing over time. So we have to use that let keyword right there, so we can alter the result over time, because that's what we're going to be doing. And it's going to start and make the assumption that the first letter is not capitalized. So we're going to take the first letter of our input str, and we're going to say, wrong hotkey, there we go, to uppercase. So that right there, we're just going to make the assumption that the first letter is not capitalized, and we're going to go ahead and just straight capitalize it. There's no logic we need to apply here. It just says go for it, right? So if y'all didn't know, strings have the same zero-based indexing. I can't wiping my hair out of my face. Strings have the same, professional, I'm not going to edit that out, have the same zero-based index accessor that arrays do, right? So we can actually think of each letter in a word or in a string, or a character, whatever you want to call it, as a zero-based index. So that way we can loop through these things with, surprise, surprise, a for loop. So as that result is going, as I tend to tell y'all, always make sure to return your result for these things to actually test correctly. We're going to start our loop at 1 because we don't need to start at 0 because, well, we just assumed that the first letter is not capitalized, and we just went ahead and capitalized it. We're going to be looping through the length of our string and simply increasing by 1 character position each time. That's how this is going to work out. So from here, what we need to do is we need to determine that if we need to concatenate onto our result the letter itself, which would be this right here, result plus equals string at position I. So as we loop through each character of our input string, we are just concatenating it on as we go along. So the way we're going to be thinking about what entails a new word here, that sounds like some kind of condition. If the word, if the letter we're looking at technically is a new word, we have to capitalize it and not just concatenate it on right away, right? We have to capitalize it and then concatenate it to our result that we're going to be returning from this particular function. So looking at it here, I'm going to say that we can determine this is a new word if we look in the previous index space, and, well, if it's a space or an empty character, then, well, we're probably at the start of a new word. And that's why I said earlier that this could be ratcheted up a couple cranks in difficulty if you want to start taking into case punctuation and things like that. So in this particular beginner's case, we're going to have the assumption there's no punctuation messing with our flow here, anything like that. No tricky shorthand or concatenations. We're just going to say that's going to be an input string of all lowercase letters. So we're going to determine when to capitalize a letter by looking in index space behind it, which is represented by I-1. So let's go ahead and start writing out our condition here for this one. I'm making so many spaces. If else, right? Because otherwise it's not a new word and we're just going to concatenate the string on as is. However, if it is a new word, all we need to do is do the exact same bit of code and simply call our toUpperCase function on the resulting string, right? So whatever that string character happens to be, we are going to uppercase it and then concatenate it to our result that we're going to be returning from this function. So what we need to do is, like I said, just simply look at the previous position in the string. So as we're looping through this sucker, if the previous position to where we currently are now is equal to an empty character, that means we have the assumption that this is starting a new word in our sentence, which means we have to capitalize the new letter. And wouldn't you know it, we're done. Again, that's why I said this. We're going to keep this one beginner, fun, and easy. Let's go ahead and test our input here. I'm going to grab this input from my copy paste. We're going to, I haven't console logged anything yet, so we can't visualize it. So I'm going to console log the result as well as return it just for visual aid here. We're going to call our handy dandy capitalized function, pass in our entry point string, and I'm going to now save this file to let my terminal run it here. I'm going to expand the window so we can actually see the sentence, and there you go. We have now successfully taken each letter of our lowercase string and capitalized each new word. And again, being able to kind of shift your window of thinking by imagining a previous index space is a cool beginner trick to add to your repertoire to utilize, right? So you can always say, I can look behind me, maybe even +1, like look ahead one character to determine some kind of logical condition. And it's one of those things where, like, when you're a total newbie, you may not think of this right away, but once you've seen it one time and used it somewhere successfully, like in this particular little algorithm here, it's in your tool belt forever to think of how I can look forward and behind my current placement to do some kind of comparison. This is actually a very useful tool as well for the more intermediate and advanced algorithms I have planned for this series, such as drawing out steps or pyramids using whatever character you like. The math there gets kind of funky, but it utilizes this pretty heavily. So yeah, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, get in there and keep on practicing these things, and hope y'all enjoying the series so far.